Welcome to Hoist the Colors. Hope you enjoyed your Thanksgiving weekend, wherever you were, whether it be in the Garden State, really anywhere, and even if you got to go to San Diego to watch the Pirates play in the Ratty Children's Invitational. I'm Tim Best, Patrick Madden with me as always. So, I mean, let's address the elephant in the room. Everyone knows this by now. 0-2 trip to San Diego. I think this might be the first time they went winless in a Feast Week tournament in at least 10 years from what I remember. Um, so, I mean, let's just address, one game at a time. Let's start with USC. I mean, this Trojans team, as we talked about with Dave Hopkins, really good with a lot of pro prospects. And it looked like Seton didn't even belong on the same court for as them, especially going down 20 early in the second half. I'm like, we're cooked. It's over. But Seton came out of nowhere. I think they got it down to a one possession game late in the game. I kind of perked up. I'm like, oh, we're in this. Like, we got a chance now. But obviously didn't pan out that way. So, Pat, let's just start with that USC game. What were your takeaways, good and bad, from that Thanksgiving game?
Well, again, you can't fall behind as far, this is historic. We've seen many a time, in Big East play and in other games against elite competition where you get off to a slow start. I mean, that's sort of where the joke of Kevin Willard, the chiropractor, comes in, that they fall behind and then at halftime they make certain adjustments. Maybe that happened in the first half or at halftime of the game Thursday night. They were down 11. I think it was 33-22. And then USC rattles off the first 9 points of the second half and puts them in a 20-point hole. And then, Kadari Richmond wakes up. He was in foul trouble in the first half, only scored 4 points, and then he puts 14 on in the second half. They got contributions from almost everybody else. You got another good game from Jaden Bediako, against some in pretty good inside players. Morgan, the center for USC, might have been the difference in as much as that he blocks 9 shots.
10. He got to 10.
10, whatever. I mean, the fact is that he's taking, we get half of those baskets, we win that game. We only lost that game by 8. So you take, if 5 of those shots that he blocks goes in, Seton Hall's a 2-point winner that night. So, but again, that's it. That's a team that has, on the one hand, you can say, yeah, that's a team that has NBA talent, and you tip your hat to how well players like Collier and Boogie Ellis and those guys played. On the other hand, guess what? When you get to Big East play, you're dealing with Tristan Newton, you're dealing with Justin Moore, you're dealing with Tyler Kolek. So you can't say, hey, we got beat by better players, because if you accept that, you might be playing better players half or more of the Big East schedule. So you got to find a way to get some wins in that game. And then we talked a little bit before, we when we went on about Alamir Dawes, about how a lot of people have talked about, what's the proper use of Alamir Dawes. Alamir Dawes, if you looked in the dictionary, it's streaky 3-point shooters. Alamir Dawes' picture is up there because those are there. And Thursday, unfortunately, was a night when he didn't have it. I think he went like 1 for 8 from 3, and then on the fateful possession with about a minute and 10 to go, Seton Hall down 4 and continuing to eat into the USC lead to the point where we turned them over 19 times, and I think 12 or 13 of them were in the second half. So we had them on the ropes and probably about to give up that 20-point lead, and Dawes misses a 3, which would have made it a 1-point game. So I mean, the problem with Dawes is you have to take the good and you have to take the bad with him. And unfortunately, Thursday night, there was a lot of talk, not to go into the weeds too much. There's a lot of talk about how in these neutral court tournaments in Thanksgiving, about how the 3-point shooting is not as good because players aren't used to shooting. Nobody at Seton Hall had probably played in the USC San Diego arena. that that the Pirates played in. And one thing Seton Hall had done well earlier in the season was finding ways to win games without hitting a lot of 3-point shots. So then you go to Thursday night and you're asking, Alamir Dawes, who, granted he can hit 3-pointers, but he's not shooting in a place he shot before. And, unfortunately has a bad shooting night on Thursday. And, that's another factor as to why the Pirates couldn't make up the 20-point deficit that they put themselves into in the second half.
So here's what I got. Obviously, the big takeaway. I mean, you gotta love and appreciate the fight that this team had. I mean, they could have easily just rolled over when they got it to 20. It was in the early stages of the second half, but they didn't. They got it to a one possession game and had their chances to, make it 1-2 points, maybe even take the lead. But I'll tell you this, like with Morgan specifically, I mean, 10 blocks is insane. But the thing is, a lot of those could have been avoided with a little thing that's known as a pump fake. Like after maybe 4 or 5, you think like if you get him up in the air, like he's just going on instinct and he's going up, blocking these shots left and right because he can time it perfectly. And a pump fake is meant to disrupt that timing. And it just on all 10 of those, I don't think I saw any pump fakes. It's just like a little thing, like it's like simple basketball IQ and just common knowledge. Like if he's blocking all these shots, get him up in the air and pump fake, draw some fouls on him. And I will say another thing, and I don't, speaking of the refs, in terms of blowing the whistle, that no call on Dawes clearly, he went up for a layup and he got hit with the body. Like, okay, like whatever on that. He gets knocked to the floor. And then a USC guy basically stomps on him. Like, I mean, I know not intentionally, but he steps right on his chest. And they call the foul on Dawes. Like, it could have been avoided if he just did the right thing and called the foul on the body on the layup. Just, listen, I'm a basketball official, and I don't really like to be critical of other officials, but like, dude, that's a simple one. You see him making contact with the body and impeding his shot, and you can't call that, and then you have the nerve to call a foul on him lying on the ground after he got bodied. It was kind of like, by the way, Saturday, I don't know if you saw this, the Alabama Auburn game early, where they called the block in the back and just completely ignored the fact that a guy almost got decapitated with a blatant face mask. Shout out to Gene Steratore for trying to justify that, but I'm going beside the point. But that, again, and that's a moot point too. But like, just little stuff like that, in terms of like doing a simple shot fake to try to disrupt Morgan's timing of blocking the shot because he just kept getting any and all blocks. So he had the 2 blocks on the one possession that ended up being a backbreaker and like jamming the fork down on Seton Hall's comeback trail. So yeah.
That's something that Holloway should be emphasizing in practice too. I mean, that's something where, because when he played, being, 5'10", 5'11", he's got to make a bunch of, when he was able to score inside, he had to make a bunch of moves and spectacular ones. When a 5'10", 5'11" guy is scoring over 6'9", 6'10" guys, he has to have a tremendous number of moves and has to have, good instincts in order to prevent the ball from being blocked and either get the ball in the basket or get to the foul line. It's also something that popped up a little bit in Friday night's game, and we'll talk about that, and particularly in how Kadari Richmond played in Friday night's game about, there's a difference between when Richmond drives to the basket and when Dre Davis drives to the basket. You notice when Davis routinely, when he goes to the basket, he's either going to get the score or he's going to get himself to the foul line. Whereas Richmond takes too many trips inside and gets nothing. When you look at a game like Friday night, and we'll talk about this in a minute. So part of it is you have to have the mentality that when you're going to go inside, you're going to go aggressively and you're going to find a way to either get the ball in the basket or you're going to get yourself or you're going to force contact. against a shot blocker like Morgan. And you better be ready for that when you're playing, guys who we know in the Big East can block shots. Klingon, Kalkbrenner, Iguodaro. You're gonna see elite shot blockers down the road. And it's got to be a game like this should be a teachable moment as to what you do to offset, to sort of you know downplay the effect that a great shot blocker is going to have. So I think that's something else to think about. Thursday's game. There are lessons to be learned from that game, and I think that's going to be a theme. That's something we're going to say a lot about these two games. Is that hopefully lessons are learned as to these two losses. That when we see them play Big East play in January and February, they've learned something from that.
So, I mean, let's get into Friday, shall we? First of all, it was almost like deja vu, getting down. I think it was the deficit was right around the same, but it only was that because Dylan Adewusu hit a bomb right at the end of the first half from three. But the thing is with the Iowa game, first of all, we dug ourselves a hole. I knew things would get ugly, and I really didn't like the fact that I think the first sub of the game, Arda was one of, if not the first sub of the game. And I'm like, what is he doing in the game so early? Like, I was just perplexed. Like, considering you're going up against a guy like Cricky and even McCaffrey to an extent, it just didn't make any logical sense. He looked like he didn't belong on the same court as those guys. And I'm not trying to knock Shaheen, but I don't know. That was gutsy, and it didn't work out. So they got doomed early on because of that. And then Dawes, the thing is with Dawes, and you and I talked about this before the show started. He sometimes just doesn't make logical basketball plays. Like I think it was the USC game where he had a 3-on-1 or a 3-on-2, and he didn't give the ball up. And Bediako thankfully was there to clean it up on the backside, but I mean, you got to dump it off. And he made a lot of these illogical plays again against Iowa. And I thought the five that should have been on the floor for most of the second half, Dawes being excluded. Richmond, he could have gotten cooked. He could have gotten cooking, but it just never happened. He had a lot of shots and layups that just put a little too much English on it and it rimmed out. So that's why he struggled even more so in this game, because he got cooking in the second half against USC. Against Iowa, not the case this time, but Coleman played really well in 22 minutes off the bench. I think those two plus Adewusu, Bediako, and Davis should have been the five that saw the court the most in the second half of that game. I'm looking at the stats now. Bediako has been a revelation, another double-double for him. Adewusu, I mean, he played 32 minutes, but it felt like less because I thought he should have been on the court a lot more because he was really efficient during his time on the court. And again, Dylan Adewusu has become the unofficial favorite player of the show, but I don't know. It just in matters when moments when they were going to matter most. I'm shocked that Adewusu wasn't on the court in favor of Dawes.
The guy who cost them Friday night's game, for better or for worse, was Richmond. Right. And it was unfortunate. If you look at the stat sheet from Thursday night, he goes 6 for 7 from the line when he put up 18 points in their attempted comeback Thursday. How many times did Richmond get to the line on Friday night? None. Didn't. And he went on Friday night. He goes
4 for 15.
He goes 4 for 15. He played 3 or 4 good minutes early in the second half.
Yeah.
And you realize he didn't score in the first half, puts up all of his 8 points, I think, within the first 5 minutes of the second half when they cut the 11-point halftime deficit. I think they got it down to 5.
That sounds about right.
In the early stages of the second, and they got a little bit closer later on in the game, but they make the big run early on, and then Richmond went missing. And the problem is you basically have to have Richmond on the court if he's not in foul trouble. Because then your options are either having Dawes or Wusu play the point, or you go with Malachi Brown,
Yeah, and
who,
that's another thing. Like I'm shocked that he barely saw the court, and it was like, I think he got the like last few seconds of the game against Iowa. I'm like, why is he only coming in now?
well, I mean, it's the question is Brown ready for that high level of competition? I mean, I've loved what Brown has done against schools like Wagner and Albany. I mean, I think he will be ready for. I mean, it's sort of, do you throw him into a game? Of course, then you go back to something. You go back to what's Arter Ozanga doing, or what I keep getting his name wrong. I'm getting it as Ozdogan doing 10 minutes into the game. What's Naganga doing? I mean, I guess one of the issues was that Hutchins Everett, even though he made the trip, was not game ready
Right.
for the 2 games out in San Diego. So that's why if you're giving, I mean, Bediako played 60 minutes in the 2 games if you look at Thursday night's game and Friday night's game. So, and I don't think he can. I think going 32 minutes is a major accomplishment for a player like Bediako, who didn't do that much at Santa Clara, by the way. Mostly he was a 15, 20-minute guy when he was at Santa Clara. So you're asking him to play a lot more minutes. I think in a perfect world, Hutchins Everett is going to get 5-10 minutes at least to give Bediako a blow. And if he didn't have Bediako available, he's got to go with either Dogan, who, is not ready, is not really ready for significant minutes in a game against a team like Iowa, or a guy like Naganga, who Holloway's still trying to figure out. Is Naganga a power forward? Is Naganga a wing? Which one? I mean, he had him play with Odzagan most of those minutes on Friday night, so obviously he's playing more of a wing position. But then you got 2 6'9", 6'10" guys against quicker opponents for Iowa, and Iowa scored off those lineups. So I mean, Iowa's Seton Hall. The only team Seton Hall might see, I guess, 2 teams Seton Hall might see, which look a lot like Iowa, would be Creighton, who obviously has, everyone on the court can hit a 3 at any given time, and maybe Connecticut, who again, Connecticut is going to have 5 guys on the court at any given time who can score. So maybe again, learning lesson is you got to make sure that everyone on the court knows what their defensive assignment is and can handle that assignment, because you might think, all right, I've got the weakest guy. Like, let's give you a crude example for Connecticut, Tristan Newton, who on your when you look at Connecticut and you say, is Stefan Castle going to beat us? Is Alex Caravan going to beat us? Is Cam Spencer going to beat us? Well, guess what? If you're only focusing on those guys stopping you, you're going to let Tristan Newton beat you. So in the same principle, a guy like Patrick McCaffrey, who might be their 3rd or 4th best option in the Iowa lineup, all of a sudden goes off and can't miss in the second half. And is that because guys like Davis and Wusu were not checking up against him properly? Who knows? But that's something where, some teams, every guy in the court is capable of beating you on any given time. And that's another lesson where, look, I might be taking the weakest offensive player, but if that guy can still score 15 points, I still have to do my job on defense, playing a man-to-man situation.
So 2 things. Number one, I just was looking at like the PDF box score from the Iowa game. So Ozdogan played 5 minutes 11 seconds. His plus minus was -7. Like it. That's. I mean, I don't know. I thought it would be worse, to be honest with you, but I mean, -7 in 5 minutes. That's not good. But and then the other point, in terms of Malachi Brown, I know. So you asked, like, is he ready for a moment in a game like that? Well, you're never gonna know unless you put him in and give him a shot. Like, so I guess that's my simple answer to the question. I feel like it's trivial, but it's true. That's why even if it doesn't pan out, I'd rather have Shaw give him a shot and try to see if it works. And if it doesn't, at least you tried. The only negative thing is that if it really gets to the kid and messes with his psyche, but to me at least, I just don't think it would hurt to at least try. And if it doesn't work, then so be it. Maybe, he gets more reps in practice and that confidence will come in due time. But again, you
I'm going to
can't
give a
know.
thought about. I'm going to give you two thoughts about that. One is I'm not as worried about Malachi Brown. I think Brown is. I think Brown is a lot cut in the same mold as Shaheen Holloway. Whereas you tell him your role is going to be to play 5 to 10 minutes, mostly in sort of garbage time. At this point, he's going to accept that. The guy I'd worry about is Kadari Richmond. Uh, what's Richmond going to think if, clearly, if you're talking about just all players being equal, and Richmond gets off as bad a start as he got on Friday night, then absolutely you bring Malachi Brown in because Richmond needs to sort of get a little bit of an attitude adjustment. Uh, I sort of question, I sort of thought a couple of things in hindsight about Friday night's game. One is a couple of people mumbled about Jaquan Sanders having strep throat on Friday night, which is why he only played 2 or 3 minutes. So then, did Richmond have strep throat, and we didn't know it? Was he sick, and we didn't know about it, and that's why he just looked so lethargic on Friday night? Or was it just we've seen this happen too often with Richmond, where when he doesn't get his shot to fall, he sort of sulks a little bit on the court, as opposed to, okay, next play I'll make the play better. I'll be more aggressive going to the basket. When the ball doesn't start going in the hoop for him early, is he sort of becoming like, I'm just like some of those finishes on Friday night were not in the same vein as finishes, let's say, Dre Davis was making, where he was aggressively attacking. And that's why Davis was the best player in the court, because every time he got the ball, he attacked. Whereas Richmond threw up a few, half-hearted floaters. He was basically just, and I get that you want to try to make the best shot you can, but, if you're not trying to get yourself to the foul line on that, it's an empty possession. And there were too many of those empty possessions in the last 7 minutes of that game when getting to the foul line or finding the basket somehow may have turned the tide over an Iowa. I was going through the same stuff USC was going on Thursday, where they saw their lead crumble and they started to lose their confidence. Tony Perkins, the best player on Iowa, was a missing person most of the second half for Iowa. Ben Kroenke didn't play as well in the second half as he did in the first half of that game. So the Iowa players who were dominating were, not really making an impact when Seton Hall was making their comeback. But then Seton Hall stopped scoring, and unfortunately, Iowa had a 3 or 4 possession lead. And I guess Seton Hall got it back within 5 with about 2 minutes to go. But after that, they never really threatened, and Iowa, pulled out a 13-point win. So it's a matter of keeping the foot on the gas, even if things aren't going well. It's something where Holloway's got to go to Richmond and say, hey, look, next play, do it better. You let go that the ball's not falling for you. If you're going to attack the basket the way you should, and don't let the fact that you're struggling impact how you're playing the game.
Like you said, you don't want an empty possession. Do your best to draw a foul. And with Kadari, I mean, not to mention free throw shooting is pretty good on this trip. I was very, very pleased with that, and I know we've talked about this till we're blue in the face, and this has been a yearly trend where Seton Hall is among the worst free throw shooting teams in the conference. But during that trip, free throw shooting was kind of a big reason why we ended up sticking around in both games. I think USC from the free throw line wasn't great. Iowa, once they got to the line more, like it seemed like they couldn't miss from the free throw line. But there was another time where I think there was an 0 for 2 trip. I couldn't remember if it was the USC or Iowa game, and we couldn't capitalize on it. And that was a backbreaker. Like if someone goes over 2 from the line, you gotta score in that situation where you know you're making a comeback and you get back-to-back missed free throws. You have to go on the other end and get yourself, even if you go to the line and only make 1 or 2, get something out of it. Cut into the lead. You can't take that opportunity and waste it.
Yeah, I think, well, again, hopefully it's a learning experience. Hopefully the comebacks that don't go your way in a tournament in November, maybe you find maybe they learn their lesson, and this we get we get comebacks like we did Connecticut last January, where they fell in the big hole and then they clawed back and managed to pull out a 1 point win against Connecticut at home. Or maybe a game like the second game at St. John's last February, where I think they were down by 8 or 9 at the half, and then just every possession they found a way to get a basket, and they found a way to get stops, and they rattled St. John's, and then they just ran away with them in the second half. So that's the type of mentality you got to have when you fall behind 8, 10, 12 points in the game. That you find a way to get points, and then you find a way to get stops, and then you don't stop. You don't get to the point where you've done it 3 or 4 times and you're happy that I know coaches look at games in segments and they say, all right, let's say you're down 12 at the half. You want to get to the first timeout with an 8 point lead. And then you want to get to the second timeout with a 2 point game. And then you want to, get your way, and then you want to find your way. You can't just sit there and say, yeah, we played 4, 8 great minutes and we took an 11 point lead and we cut it to 4. The idea is if you're still down 4 the rest of the way, you still lose.
Yeah.
You got to find a way to get yourself over the top. And again, that part of it was Richmond. Part of it was that Dawes, even though I think he went 4 for 11 from 3, he still took some shots he shouldn't have taken in the second half of that, in the second half on Friday night. So there were still too many empty trips. And those empty trips, unfortunately, when they all add up, it adds up to a second loss in 2 nights.
So now the question, now we move on to this only one game this week before they have the weekend off. And then, we'll talk more about on the next episode, we'll talk about that big week where they go to Baylor on the 5th. And then, of course, the Garden State Hardwood Classic at the Rock December 9th. So in between, though, Wednesday night, they get Northeastern. This Huskies team, obviously not impressive at any point. I mean, so in a way, this is good for them that they get a good bounce back opportunity back on their home floor before they get a lot of time to rest before they go down to Waco to play a really solid Baylor team that won, if I'm not, unless I'm somehow hallucinating, that won the NIT tip-off event in Brooklyn. So, I mean, overall assessment, what's the expectations? What do you want to see from this team Wednesday night? And getting certain guys, aka Malachi Brown, back into the mix to get even the younger guys and hopefully Jaquan Sanders healthy again to get them ready for what should be a really tough week of games coming up to start December.
I mean, honestly, the whole month of September is a series of tough games. Baylor, Rutgers, the trip that Missouri's not playing as well as people. Missouri's not playing at the level they played last year, but you still got to go out to Kansas City in front of a hostile environment. And then the 20th, the good old defending national champions, UConn Huskies, who look every bit, if not a little bit better than they did last season. So basically, you're 3 weeks from when Big East play starts. So I think the first thing is keeping Isaiah Coleman established in this rotation. I know a lot of people have talked about, if and when Coleman should be in the starting lineup. And I think that sort of misses what other people do. Like, the 2 players they talk about benching would be either Dylan Adewusu, who he does a lot of other things on the court. He may not be the best scorer in the world, but he rebounds, he defends, he has quick hands, so he gets steals. So there's a bunch of stuff that goes sort of under the radar that you sort of have to make up for when you miss on Wusu. And the other question is, do you put Alamir Dawes on the bench? And then the question is, can you find the right time when he might go off for three pointers in a row, 4 3-pointers in a row, and something? So you got to figure. It'd be great if Alamir Dawes could hit the role of what you call a microwave scorer. Somebody you just put out there on the court, you give him 10 minutes, and he puts up 12 points. And he's got the capability of putting up 12 to 15 points in any 10-minute span. But, how do you find, if you're going to put him on the bench, when do you find the right time to put him in and hope that he can hit 2 or 3 3-pointers? If you ultimately decide to go the route of putting Isaiah Coleman in this starting lineup. Then you're hoping, when do we get Elijah Hutchins-Everett back, and when does he play meaningful minutes where he's a contributor? Because I don't think Jaden Bediako can play 30 minutes a game. As good as he is, as much as he's giving you the illusion that he could be, an Angel Delgado double type guy, and he certainly has outperformed what our expectations were. Eventually a guy like that playing a lot of minutes, he's not going to be he's going to be, you play him 20-25 minutes, he'll give you what he's giving you the first 3 weeks of this season. You start playing him 30 minutes, and even Friday night, he didn't seem to be quite as effective in the second half as the minutes were piling up. And honestly, Shaheen Holloway didn't have the only option he went to late in that game was he went back to his small 5-out lineup with Davis, Coleman, Wusu, Richmond, and I think Dawes. He went with the small lineup instead of, he wasn't going to bring Naganga or Zogan back in the game. So that's what you need, Elijah. That's what you need Hutchins-Everett to give you the 10-15 minutes that you think he's capable of doing. And again, he showed some things in the first 2 games before, unfortunately, he got the concussion in practice. So now you have 12 days before you take the big trip down to Texas for the Baylor game. So you got a lot of time in practice over the next week and a half. You have you have the game against Northeastern to give everyone some game action where, you can see what you got from Everett. You can see what you got from Jaquan Sanders. You get Malachi Brown more in the mix, and maybe you figure out a role for Sede Naganga, where you can say, all right, can he play a little bit inside? Can he give Davis a little bit of a rest and things like that?
Yeah, I can see Nganga being a viable backup power forward for backing up Dre Davis. I think that is kind of probably his wheelhouse for the role that he's most suited for. You don't want to burden him at the 5. And speaking of Bediako, you don't want to burden him with playing a ton of minutes if he's not quite ready for that. So that's where you hope Hutchins-Everett is going to be ready to go as early as Wednesday, but at the bare minimum, given that you have 5 days after that to prepare for Baylor, you gotta pray that he's gonna clear concussion protocol. You would anticipate that he would too, given, again, 5 days to prepare him. And I think we have 4 days off from Friday to Wednesday, because Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. Play the game Wednesday, and then 5 more days off before you play at Baylor. That has to give Hutchins-Everett enough time, because Bediako needs some help. He's been great, but he can't do that for 30-plus minutes. You can't expect him to do that 30-plus minutes a night, every single night out. So that's why Hutchins-Everett, getting him, even if he just getting him on the floor and getting Bediako a breather, even if Hutchins Everett plus minus or whatever, I try not to read into that. But if he goes out on the floor and just can contribute in a way where, like, I'm not expecting him to put up Bediako numbers, but if he can grab a couple boards, play well defensively, which I know is a very important thing to do if you want to play for Shaheen Holloway, then great. So it's, again, time will only tell. But yeah, so that's, you know, before we recorded this, Pat, it was funny how, like, we were talking like this was going to be like almost like a group therapy session. But really, I don't know. It didn't really feel like that because while going 0-2 was really frustrating, I guess I was more frustrated in the moment. Now that I've had a couple days to process, I'm able to channel that and just let it out in a way where, like, I'm not screaming or like, essentially, if I'm like a father who is like deploring his kids and saying like, you're never gonna live up to live my legacy and stuff, and like, you know what I mean. But this has been healthy.
I mean, look, even last season uh, at this time last season, they had already lost to Iowa at home, and then they had the Florida trip. For as good as Tyree Samuel, by the way, the SEC Player of the Week, uh, just baffles the mind how. I mean, not that he wasn't good for us last season, but now he goes to Florida and becomes the second coming of, uh, Jerry Walker, with his ability to dominate on the inside. But what was my trainer? I said, as good as Tyree Samuel's desperation three to beat Memphis was on that first night, uh, the losses to Oklahoma and Siena on nights 2 and 3 of that Florida trip, and there was reason. Last year, I think, felt worse in a way. On the other hand, you're still looking at they still haven't beaten a major opponent yet,
Mm-hmm.
and you have to get the first one of those on the sort of on the mantle before you can sort of have confidence. Because again, obviously, every game you play in the Big East is against a major opponent, so you need to get a win. You need to get a win or two sometime in December against Baylor, Rutgers, and/or Missouri in order to feel like you can beat major level competition, because that's what you got to beat to finish 500 or better in the Big East and then build some type of NCAA tournament resume. You got games right off the bat in Big East play. Connecticut, at Xavier, at Providence. And the Connecticut games going to be the hardest of the three to win because Connecticut's a top 5 team. Connecticut looks like they could, if the tournament started today, you'd have to put Connecticut in the Final Four. I mean, they're just that good. But that doesn't mean that you can't just say, I'm just going to chalk that up to an L, because I do think under the right circumstances, a Seton Hall team can be very competitive against Connecticut. Connecticut hasn't played a defense. You want to say Texas. I don't know if Connecticut's played a defense as good as our defense is going to be perfectly honest. Maybe can North Carolina play good defense against them? What are they going to look like against Kansas on Friday night? I don't know. But, we've had the blueprint to beat Dan Hurley teams in the past. And you've got basically the same personnel: Richmond, Dawes, Davis. You've got the same type, and now you have a legitimate guy who can, maybe give Donovan Kling and Samson Johnson trouble on the inside and Jaden Bediako. So you've got the pieces in place to frustrate a Connecticut team, but you got to have the confidence to do it. And if they walk into that UConn game, let's say 7-4 or 6-5, without beating Baylor, Missouri, or Rutgers, who knows what type of mindset they're going to be in when the real season starts on December the 20th.
You bring up a point, about, under the right circumstances, anything can happen. And this is a metaphor and reference. It's true. Anyone can win in the Big East on any given night. Case in point, DePaul beat Xavier last year.
Okay.
DePaul beat Xavier last year. They beat Xavier, and if I'm not mistaken, that was their last win before they lost 12 in a row, and then they beat us in the Garden.
in the
Oh,
tournament. Yep,
don't even
that game. Well,
so much for my frustration, feeling like I'm channeling it, and then I just remembered that, and it just whatever. Like we got one game, take care of Northeastern, and then worry about that Baylor Rutgers moment between that Rutgers game and then that game against Missouri. Out of those three, find a way to win two of them. But realistically, you got to bare minimum. You can't go 0-3. You got to win bare minimum one, but shoot for two. I just don't see them winning at Baylor. But then again, we're getting ahead of ourselves. We'll talk about them in due time. But before we go, Pat, I know we covered a lot, but just any last minute thoughts that's on your brain before we sign off.
yeah, we talked about this, and I guess it was fortunate that they started selling player name jerseys Friday afternoon and not Saturday afternoon. But the auspices of Onward Setonia. I don't know if we want to give JP Carlissimo credit or we want to give Mike McBride. Give him joint credit.
Yeah.
Because I think the idea was brewing that you can get names on the jerseys. And I thought this to myself, the great Jerry Walker, uh, good old number 21 back in the day. Uh, and think about who wears 21 now for the Pirates. Isaiah Coleman,
Yeah.
who, you'd want to hope that he's a foundational. When everyone's talked about how he's off to such a good start. Dave Popkin talked about this last week, and Dave Popkin thinks higher of Isaiah Coleman than I do. You have to think that he's a foundational piece. So if you want to, one of the things I did was I'm going to buy. I don't wear jerseys a lot, but I bought a kid size Isaiah Coleman jersey, and I'm going to donate it to Team Walker. And that might be something which might be, if you're not going to wear a jersey, you don't have anybody to give a jersey to, buy one and donate it to Team Walker. Any of those kids who, Jerry does such a wonderful job helping out in the Newark and Jersey City area, would love to get a Seton Hall jersey. And if you buy an Isaiah Coleman one, you're buying one that has Jerry Walker's number on it. So in that sense, if that's something I would encourage fans to do. Unfortunately, they had a really good deal Friday, but you know what? It's for a good cause. It's for actually you can make it for multiple good causes. Not only is it going towards the NIL program, which is so important, and I think that also gives us a head start on some other schools in the Big East, by the way, because I don't, unless they're doing it on the down low, finding jerseys that have players' names on it. I don't think a lot of schools are doing that yet. And I know that's every kid on Christmas will want to see a jersey. So if people aren't buying them for their kids for Christmas, donate one to Team Walker. And I'm sure that Jerry Walker can find a number of kids who would love to walk around their neighborhoods wearing, a Kadari Richmond jersey, an Isaiah Coleman jersey, whatever jersey you want to buy and donate to Team Walker. It kills multiple birds with one stone. So, and I think I tweeted that on Friday, and I'll tweet that idea out again attached to this episode. And I think that's something which, the Onward Setonia people will really appreciate, being able to help the Walker Foundation, because Jerry Walker's all over Onward Setonia.
And speaking of Team Walker, throughout the month of December, men's and women's basketball, he'll be doing the Team Walker toy drive, and it's going to be, that's actually really, really great that you bring that up, Pat, because a lot of those kids, his Team Walker is based out of based out of Jersey City, and you have a lot of, unfortunately, a lot of impoverished kids in that area, and in Newark too, where the Pirates play their home games. So a jersey like that, trust me, like speaking from experience, I remember, like I think I still have a home film from Christmas, like it was like 2000 2001 maybe, but I remember distinctly how much my eyes lit up, and the irony of it, this is terrible given the context, but as a young Knicks fan, how much my eyes lit up when I got oh god, this is gonna be bad, the Trail Sprewell jersey. I hate the fact
He
given
was the man back then. I hate to say
I
it.
I know, but like but we all know that Latrell Sprewell had a little run-in with PJ, which we're not going to go into detail
Right.
because everybody knows what happened. But the point being, I remember when I was 4 years old getting that Sprewell jersey and like how much my eyes lit up. So I can't even imagine what it's going to mean like for kids who aren't as privileged and as fortunate as you and I were, to get a jersey for Christmas from Santa or anyone, family member or even especially a donation. It means a lot more because you're doing something for them for the greater good. So I'm gonna tip of the tip of the cap to you on that, Pat. By the way, for those if you want to take a little trip down memory lane, for those of you who remember the Under Armour reunion, Madison Square Garden, my junior and senior year. The Under Armour schools competing. That was the year we beat undefeated South Carolina my junior year, and then we
Was that
beat
South Carolina or Texas Tech?
we beat South Carolina my junior year when they were
Okay.
unbeaten, and then Texas Tech was the following year. That team that went to the Elite Eight. And lost to Villanova. But yeah, I wanted to, point that out because, as I tip the cap, I'm like, oh yeah, here's a little Seton Hall tie-in because, the Under Armour union. I'm pretty sure the guy who gave me this here hat, because I think all the players, and all personnel got like a gift, a gift bag, and that snapback was included, and the guy got it from. Want to go down memory lane? I know fans will love him. Dalton Sofer. So I want to give Dalton a shout out. I missed another great
San
number
Diego guy, I
21.
think, by the way.
What's that?
Could have to go full circle, San Diego guy.
And also, you know what number he wore? 21.
Uh, it
Okay.
doesn't hit with it. It doesn't win all the time.
So I don't know if you could tie everything in better than that. So this is where we're gonna call it a day, shall we? So that's gonna do it for this episode of Hoist the Colors. Thanks for tuning in again. For Patrick Madden, I'm Tim Best. Thanks for tuning in, and until next time, onward, Setonia. Take care, y'all.